Hi, today I will be discussing Databricks DevOps in Azure. So what we will be talking about today is how to create a CI/CD pipeline that will deploy your Databricks artifacts from your work area all the way through dev, QA, and production. Inside of Databricks, you have basically an area where you'll be working, and this will I will refer to as your work area. This is when you log into the Azure portal where you develop your notebooks and do your basic development work. This work area workspace is a workspace that will be tied to a Git repo. So it can be GitHub, Azure DevOps, or any repo you'd like that's supported. And what this repo will hold is it will hold your ARM templates, your Databricks notebooks, any Scala code, Python scripts, cluster definitions, etc. So everything you need to deploy this to your development work area, which is another workspace, and then it will be pushed to QA into production. These workspaces are not under source control. They are the results of this source control. So when this pipeline runs, it will push out two things. It will create a Azure Key Vault, which will be used for holding Databricks secrets backed by Key Vault, and it also will be used to hold a service principal that is needed to call into the Databricks REST API. In order to authenticate to the Databricks REST API, we need a service principal or a Databricks token, but the service principal is the preferred technique, which can be controlled by security. So once this is done, the same workspace and Key Vault is created in QA and again in production. So I'll show you how to go about doing this and how it works when you're deploying your artifacts. So the pipeline is part of this repo. There's a Azure pipeline YAML file that you can import, or you can use GitHub Actions to do this. These workspaces don't need to be in the same subscription, and you can also bring your own key vault. So if you already have a centralized key vault, you just change the template to reference that key vault, and you won't need to actually create a separate key vault instance. And these ARM templates here, there's two, one for creating the actual key vault and one for creating the workspace. And the workspace that's created in this example is not tied to a VNet. So if you want to tie it to a VNet, there's instructions how to get that to a VNet as well. Inside the work area for your Databricks DevOps, there's a big piece around how do you do your work in terms of your notebooks inside of Databricks. Currently, Databricks only supports Git integration for their notebooks, and each notebook has to be done one by one. So that means if you have a notebook in a users folder, you need to tie that to source control, and user 2 needs to tie that to source control. They are changing to a project-based Git integration, but this will be talking about the non-project based. But basically what happens here is initial work will be done in a user's folder. This is how users experiment, try doing various items, and then they need to move it to a project folder. So the project folder is all the notebooks that will recursively be pushed out as part of this quote-unquote project. So typically you're going to create a Databricks workspace for doing ETL work or doing one for machine learning. So you could have many different project folders, or you could have one workspace per project folder. It's really up to how you want to organize your workspaces. But this is assuming users are going to be working in this area and then either cloning their notebooks to this folder or moving them. So if you do clone or move them, you do have to reconfigure the Git source control to point to that new folder. And then what will happen during this deployment is this folder will be pushed out into the various dev, QA, and production. Now, ideally, users should start working in this folder and everything would be fine, but in reality, users typically don't do that, so we will support both approaches. If the users start here, then everything will be good. So just to review, we will create a Databricks workspace called our work area, and this is analogous in my world to if you're doing custom development. This is your local machine where you're building code and developing code. But with Databricks, you need to do that in the cloud. That's where you're going to create your clusters and do some of your basic initial testing. It will deploy to a dev workspace. This is really just to exercise your pipeline and then run them to make sure everything's working correctly. Should be pretty simple, it's just a sanity check area. I don't do my work area in my dev workspace because I want to exercise my pipeline once, and then it goes to QA and production. So my next segment, I'll start talking about the code that's under source control.